Hello, everyone, and welcome to First Blood. Yes, we've had quite a lengthy hiatus. I know that. I know we've been away for a long, long time. That's all my fault, pretty much. Well, it's kind of your fault as well. I'm just fucking sick of you guys. I just can't bring myself. No, I'm kidding. You guys are great. It's been a difficult show. As I said last night on Trash Talk, it's a difficult show to put together. We've got two co-hosts who want to play and or coach, and turns out a lot of our guests want to do that as well. So when we try and pull people into the show, it can be very difficult, and that's why we're doing a show a little bit earlier today, and my co-hosts aren't here, so there's no Broken Shard, there's no Nintendo, don't worry, they are still both affiliated with the show, but I have managed to get a great guest, someone I've been wanting to get on First Blood for a long, long time, but he's a bit of a traveller, a bit of a nomad. Sometimes he's in Korea, sometimes he's in America, sometimes he's in Europe, he's all over the place, but it is, for me, the leading Western coach in League of Legends. It is Nick, who likes to be called LS now. I mustn't call him Lastshadow. He's getting rid of that. He gets very upset by that. So it's great to get you on the show finally. How have you been? Let's start there.
I've been great, Richard. I woke up just for you. This whole show is for you. No, everything's good. I'm getting ready to go back to LA in a week, and then I'll be there through playoffs, and then I'll come back to Korea.
Well, for someone who's just woke up, mate, you're looking like you're in a fucking boy band. This is unbelievable. Like, what's your secret? How do you do it? How do you stay so youthful and vibrant? I could use some of those stem cells that you've got. But we'll go to stem cell technology. Why not? It turns out it's what people are here for. But I think we need to start actually before we even get into the kind of meat and drink of the show. Last night on Trash Talk, there was a chap who came on, a guy called Stout. I'd never heard of him before. I'd never come across him before. He was saying he was an independent analyst, who had been doing work for all of these like high level teams, including Gravity. And then as the call went on, it kind of became more and more apparent that actually some of the things he was saying might not be true. And he even went so far right at the end of the call before we cut him off to say that someone told us that he'd offered pictures of his penis if you would coach him. Yeah. So tell me all about this, because I am fucking... It never ceases to amaze me like what goes on behind the scenes in League of Legends. So who is this guy, and has he done anything with Gravity? And more importantly, did he offer to show you his penis?
No. All right. So basically, all right. So I have my Skype open, right? So anyone can add me. Like, you can right click me right now and see all the contacts, okay? And sometimes I get the crazies. All right? Like, the people that, like, either they're really, like, socially inept or, like, they don't understand what's really going on. And anyways, so this is a guy that messaged me last year, I guess around the time I joined SHC, and he was obviously a homosexual or whatever, and he would message me occasionally because sometimes people confuse that having me on Skype apparently means I'm your friend, even though that's not the case, right? And so, he does these awkward messages where he, like, messages me on like a personal level, and I'm like, who are you, question mark, in my head, and I just kind of like ignore it. Anyways, so it was a guy that really wanted coaching, and I guess I look back at the chat logs and I didn't offer coaching at that time, or like something was going on, or like I was overbooked, whatever. Anyway, so apparently he did really offer that, because the chat logs show him asking me a lot of personal gay questions or like something. And then basically throughout the year, he just offers to do random ass stuff, but I don't really ever request his service. So I don't know. I mean, you saw the end result, like what he was saying to me after. I mean, he kept trying to message me on Skype throughout the remainder of the night after that broadcast. So I don't know. Like, I don't know if he thinks that it's like funny, but that's kind of like pathetic when he's in like his mid-20s, I think, right? When I clicked his profile. So I don't know.
You shouldn't say that. That's only going to encourage him now. Oh, you were clicking my profile, eh? He'll message you right now with more offers. Maybe you even get to see the balls this time.
Holy shit!
But the point he was making on the show, and it does kind of segue into what I wanted to talk about with you right at the top of the show, was about coaching in NA. And he was saying that the big problem in NA, it falls into two categories. The first is that organizations like to recycle older players who aren't equipped to be coaches and they don't bring anything to the table. And he highlighted Skara as one of those people. He said, I don't see what Skara brings to CLG. I think that's a ridiculous pickup. And then the other thing he said was a big problem in NA was that everyone worships Koreans. And he said, you were the embodiment of that. You were the kind of coach who would say to their team, hey, we're doing this today because the Koreans are doing it. And fuck, we've had no time to practice it. We're just going to do it the Korean way and try and freestyle our way through a game. So while I could see there were elements of truth or perhaps, an element of a good point in what he was saying, I think probably he did take it a little bit too far. So let's start talking about the first point he made first, which is about organizations recycling older players. And as I said, he used Skara as an example. Now, I kind of have a gut feeling that that's a little bit true. I've seen some players that are kind of has-beens, washed up, and they've ended up being coaches. And I think really, now I'm not saying Skara is one of those guys, but, it does seem to be an option for teams. They think, well, fuck it, we'll get an ex-player in, and sometimes that's not always the best option. So what's your opinion about that?
Okay, well, I guess first on the topic of players becoming coaches, sometimes it doesn't necessarily make sense because they think basically what they're using their position and status as a professional player to transition that to override or basically have more credentials than some people applying for said job. And because teams are unaware of what coaches do or what analysts really do, or whatever, they just take stuff for face value, and they'll take something that's really bad, and they'll think that it's really good because they don't have anything to compare it to, right? Yeah. And then the only things that they can compare it to are people like the crazy. You know what I mean? The crazy is that sometimes they send in applications, or you have these people that clearly don't know fuck all about League. But they're a part of the November coaches, right? Which is the term that I coined for all the people that they saw the Riot post and they're like, oh, a job exists? Well, I can't make it as a player. Let me put on my big pants and fucking, become a coach. I can do that, right? Yeah. And it's kind of like you don't just wake up and decide that I'm going to become a coach because that's not how it works, right? And there's all these things that goes into being a coach. Now, on the topic of pro players that have become coaches, I don't know too many off my head. I think of Prawley, I think of Skara, I think of your friend and mine. I think you know who I'm referencing, and I think of Loco, who's good. Loco's good, Skara's good, Prawley's good. Who I no other names are coming to mind. If I'm forgetting someone, then whatever, but. Okay, so he mentioned Skara, or he isolated Skara and his attack on NA coaches, and that seemed to be the most bizarre to me. Skara's history throughout League of Legends, right, as a veteran in the game, probably holds a lot of weight and respect amongst players, right? Mm-hmm. That coped with his demeanor and his personality, how he is, and the professionalism that comes behind him, is probably really good for CLG. Right, because that seems to be something that they need, for referencing Monte Cristo's interviews or Monte Cristo stuff Monte has said. Yeah. Or you watch Chasing the Cup, etc. It seems like Skara's personality could mesh really well with the team. That synergized with the fact that Skara's one of the few Westerners I've since my time on SHC, I've gone out and said that his understanding and his analysis of certain situations and the game. Is unlike most pros that I have talked to, right? And so I really respect him in that regard. So you fuse all these things, his personality, his veteranship, I guess, his knowledge of the game, etc. He's perfect for CLG. In fact, he's more perfect than, say, me or Loco. Do you know what I mean? Or something or Prawley or whatever, because he has all those components that CLG needs. And sometimes there's going to be coaches that they may not know the most, and they actually may be wrong more often than they're right, but somehow they hold the team together, and they play the act of the unifying voice, and that makes them good for the team. And you can see that in Korean teams. You can see it in some Western teams. It ends up happening. And so there's that. The thing with NA coaches is I think probably by the end of summer split or something, maybe teams will begin to have ideas of what is good and what's not, because right now you have some people that they're doing it for their first time, right? and it's kind of hit or miss. You know what I mean? Like everyone's gonna get a feel for it. On the topic of myself or something like the Korean things that he referenced. Now, first off, I guess it should be noted that everything he was saying was a complete lie, right? Because he's never done anything for Gravity. He later admitted it in a tweet, or not a tweet, Skype chat log, etc. And we had the Gravity manager saying, never even talking to her about him. On the topic of me, a lot of people think that I force Saint and Keen and like Haunser and all these, my players, etc., to play certain champions or to play certain comps, but that's actually not even the case. Like Keen, because I got a lot of flack for Keen picking Victor, right, and Haunser picking Hecarim, but if you looked at their solo queue, like that's a lot of work, right? To type in OpGG and like go on and look for up some play. That's very difficult. You would have seen that Keen was playing Victor 3 weeks before it even debuted in LCK. You know what I mean? And you would see Haunser had like 30-something games on Hecarim before it was played. Like, I remember the day it was played, and we were all sitting there like watching it, and we're laughing, and like, this is us, like, these are the champions we play, right? And we were like making fun of Keen and shit because it got played in LCK. And so then, of course, like what I say to my player, like I don't care if people know this. I basically say to them, in practice, we will practice what is the most efficient or what is the best. But when it comes game day, I will not put you on something that I don't think you're comfortable on or you don't think you're comfortable on. I'm not going to force you into anything. Like, that's not how I operate. But we have to work towards and strive towards the things that have been proven to be the best, Like, this isn't like a real example, but hypothetically, if, said player hates, matchup A versus champion B, right? But we know from Korea that matchup's fine or something, well, then you have to eventually learn it. You can't write it off due to inability to do it, right? Like, then you end up getting what happens in StarCraft 2 with foreigners and Koreans, where foreigners, they try to come up with these like wonky fucking weird ass shit to compromise for their inability to perform as mechanically pristine as the Koreans, right? And you don't want to have that happen.
So that leads me on to the next part. The second thing that Stout was saying, and you're right, we should have probably underlined that a little bit more. Stout was telling a few fibs about the work that he'd done, or rather hadn't done. Now, he did say that he feels there is a Korean worship in the West, that we will look at the way Koreans do things and we will look to replicate them in a deluded belief that because it's the strongest region, that if you copy everything they do in a different region, in a different culture, different environment, it'll somehow bring about the same level of success. And like, he pointed you out as being the poster boy for that. He said that, you lived out in Korea, you played in Korean solo queue, you got Diamond 1, I believe, in Korean solo queue, maybe even higher.
I got mastered, yeah.
Well, there we go. I apologize.
No, it's okay.
And because of that, he feels that what you do is you look to the East and you say, this is what the Koreans are doing, and you almost impose that on American teams who are willing anyway to absorb what the Koreans do. And, I can think of numerous examples where something's been popularized in Korea and the Americans have jumped on it, perhaps Blue Ezreal's an example. I know that wasn't specifically a Korean thing, but, and these things come over into North American play. Now, is any of that true? I mean, do you feel that you're imposing almost like a Korean imperialist agenda on your players, that you're saying because Korea is the best region, we must do things the Korean way? Is there any truth in that at all?
I would say like maybe there's like 70% truth, right? In the sense that it is inarguable that Korea, not just in League of Legends, however, any game they choose to win at, they win. That's inarguable. Like they destroy every competition, they destroy everything. StarCraft 1, Warcraft 3, right? You had Moon, you had foreigners that would rise up, you know what I mean? You had Todd, you had Grubby, you had, what was it, Sky was Chinese, right? The human player or something. You had these players that, they would, same thing, that you have Naniwa, Stefano, you had Thorzane at one point, you had Idra, you had, like, it's not to say that you can't have it happen. Now look at the West. You had TSM, you had Cloud9 that, at one point almost rivaled and challenged the Koreans. Like, you have Forgiven right now on 80 carry. Like, inarguably probably top 1080 carry world, right? Not even like, and that's something I don't just go out there and say, right? Because in the past, I always reference that isolated top Westerners are still worse than most average OGN NLB players. But like, with that being said or something, I think it's foolish not to look at Korea for reference or guidance, right? Much like how in Russia's dominance in chess, were you not going to look at the Russians? Do you know what I mean? When they were dominating, just because Bobby Fischer would eventually rise up and dominate? No, of course you look at the best. Like in Korea, there's a motto for practice or something that until you change, or until if you want to change something about someone's playstyle, this was in StarCraft, you first must be able to do everything they can do. Because if you can't, then you're a worse player, right? And you don't want to have like this like trickle effect where you're really good in one meta and you're shit in another. Really good in one meta, shit in another. We've already seen that happen to some, EU and NA players where they were really good in one meta because the meta favored top laners and the duels took 25 seconds. But then they go into the knife fight meta where a trade is, Lissandra versus Aurelia and it ends in 8 seconds and they don't cut it. You know what I mean? Because there's all these like the minutia of top lane, really comes out, and they can't handle it, and they end up breaking down and falling apart. And so that's why I say about a lot of pro players, the stars have to align. Like the meta has to favor them, the champions, who they get to actually play, the champions they interact with, and the team that they're on. The really exceptional and gifted players are the ones who persevere through all of that,
So
anyways,
look,
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, of course it does. Yeah. So following on from that point, then, before I sort of rewind and talk a little bit about gravity specifically, my question to you would be, if it was as simple as being able to sort of emulate the Korean strategies, then I think we would have seen a lot of Western teams actually challenge Korean dominance and challenge Koreans to international tournaments, at Worlds, things like IEM, and obviously we'll come to the recent IEM shortly. Right. But that hasn't happened, and equally the Korean players that have been exported to the West, it's been, I would say it's been more missed than hit. I think there's an absolute minority of players that have had a huge impact. Lustboy, for example, is someone I would point to as having an absolute huge impact. I think that's undoubted. But I think for the most part, a lot of the Koreans that have come over to Europe and NA have been disappointing. So what is it about taking tactics out of Korea, taking players out of Korea, that when they're transposed into a Western environment, they don't work? Why does that happen?
Well, okay, let me use some of the top Western players as examples, I guess, for this. You look at Reckless when he was dominating, and you asked him how much he played each day, right? And he used to, I think at one point he said 16 hours, right? And you looked at other really, really insane players in the West. You look at Bjergsen or something. You look at Doublelift, back when he was really, really, really good. You look at Forgiven now, etc. You just keep looking at these players. And one thing they have in common is their work ethic. And in Korea, basically, because of how the culture works and because pro gaming houses, are meant to emotionally condition you for the game, it's not necessarily about talent. I'm not saying that Koreans, are genetically superior to the West. No, the issue is that China can buy out all the top Koreans, okay? The problem with Korea is it has a habit, okay, throughout history of breeding the best gamers. Yeah. Just because, like, the conditions and the culture, because the culture is, if you're not better than the guy next to you, you're a shame to your parents, your family, your friends, etc., right? So it creates this never-ending bloodlust where people are always trying to just fucking one-up each other, etc. And so the Koreans that come over to the West or NA or something, I think in most cases it's kind of like a cruise. You know what I mean? They're like, I get to get money, travel, live in a team house, learn a little bit of English, etc. And then you have ones that are basically like Dunning-Kruger in full blast, Europe. So anyways, you have, ones like that it's just like really nonsensical and it becomes toxic at some points. And I don't know. Like in the West, I don't think anyone would argue that most of the Samsung players that were bought out clearly just did it for the money, right? Because they're
Yeah, of
not living
course.
up to form. And who's gonna fucking turn down $1 million a year to play a video game? No one, especially not if you're already good at it. You're not gonna give the same effort. You don't have the same motivation. You don't have the same fucking determination. You know what I mean? And the ones that did were undeterred by the Chinese billionaires. You know,
Mm.
Faker most notably.
Yeah.
You know, or likewise, if you only care about money, you don't give a shit about the pro scene. Apto, you know. Um, so it goes each way. Does that make sense?
Mm.
Yeah. All right.
So
So
we can rewind to the NA stuff now, and this is
yeah.
your involvement with Gravity. Now, this might put you
Yes.
on the spot a little bit, and we do have a rule on First Blood that there's no fence sitting. You've got to answer, but again, perhaps it's your beautiful eyes or something, and I will let you off the hook on this one, okay?
Okay.
If you need it, if you need to pull the escape cord. But Saint
Okay.
Vicious has quite publicly said on Twitter on numerous occasions that
Yes.
he doesn't value any coach that he's come across, pretty much, that he feels there actually aren't any real good coaches in League of Legends that he's come across. Equally, I've heard rumors, and I will say they are just that. I haven't been able to verify one way or the other that Saint has a very imposing presence on the team, and that he almost views himself in a lot of ways as a player coach. That it's his way or the highway, and
Hmm.
if people don't conform to that, they will quickly find themselves out of the team, or at least having a bad time in that working environment. Yet
Right.
here's you, which many people refer to as the best, Western coach. There's loads of testimony about that, and you're now at Gravity. So, how have you and Saint kind of been reconciling Saint's views with your status and abilities?
Well, all right, so I guess let's just get a few, I guess, facts that Saint has listed out of the way,
Okay.
but not just Saint, other Gravity players. So when I came on, I'm not gonna name drop or whatever. It was said that I beat out other pros for the job.
Okay.
Saint also said in the interview with Travis that I was the best coach that was, let in, and then he also went on to proceedingly say that he thinks most coaches lose their efficiency after 3 weeks or something, and he said that's not going to happen with me.
Mm.
So that's just going off public statements. Saint to me is extremely fun to work with because he has a maturity unlike other players I've ever worked with or interacted with, including like Koreans, which is really fun. He does have like a player coach role, and that's also really good for conversation. Because when you have a player that's thinking about the game in a coaching way or something, it can really lead to elaborate discussion and it can lead to really healthy conversation for the team as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Saint as a player, I don't think there's any doubting. He doesn't have the mechanics of Cacao or Dandy or something, but he has a lot of strengths which a lot of people don't really see. And I've said this to him, and I'm not like bullshitting or anything. I've seen a lot of players shot calling in game, and
Yeah.
their ability to speak and play. Saint is by far and none the absolute best player I've ever seen, including Koreans, when it comes to being able to speak and play. His ability to, articulate his thoughts properly and efficiently, like during team fights and like rotations and stuff, whilst
Mm.
under a lot of pressure, is like superb. And having someone on the team like that is really good. The stuff with me and Saint is if he disagrees with me or I disagree with him or something, it goes straight to the mathematics. You know
Mm.
what I mean? We pull open a sandbag map, Summoner's Rift, and we basically relive whatever it is that we're talking about or something, and that's just basically it. That's how you have to approach those type of conversations or those type of arguments. And I've publicly said many times that I don't like to speak an opinion about League of Legends
Mm.
because I think that League is very chess-like in the sense that it has absolution up until mechanics become
Mm.
factored in.
So, how would you describe your relationship with Saint then? I mean, some coaches really embed themselves in with their team and they become, part of the family, if you like. You see them hanging out with players, duoing with players, they're very close. Other coaches maintain what you could call a professional distance. They don't really talk to anyone except when it's time to work, and they make themselves available via Skype and that kind of thing. But ultimately, they do keep a bit of distance from the players. Now, given that Saint is quite a polarizing person, I think he's almost like the de facto leader of the team, and is a well-respected professional, but also kind of disliked by some people as well because of his outspoken nature.
Right.
Given that you're quite an outspoken person as well, how does that work? I mean, have you guys been getting along okay?
Yeah, I think, like, I'll just say this. I think that there has been only one disagreement or something that went over like 5 minutes, honest to God. We get along really well. We don't like I would say like at the Gravity House, like everything at the Gravity House is pretty lax. I do spend most of my free time with either Keen, Cop, or the manager Jake. You know what I mean? In terms of like what does happen like after scrims or like if I'm not streaming or something. But me and Saint get along like perfectly fine. Like we talk about stuff, back to and from LCS, whatever. We talk about stuff before games and like, it's basically like we're not like super close best friends, but that's probably because of like the age gap, between he and I understand that. And then also the fact that he's only known me now like a month and a half, you don't want to, so I get it and I understand it. And it's completely fine. But in terms of our working relationship, everything's really good.
So how have things been with you and Gravity in general? Because there was a lot of questions that, I had, I think about the Gravity setup. I mean, first of all, the ownership of the team, that it was just kind of one guy who just came in and, pumped, had a lot of money, had a paycheck, and effectively, bought the slot. And that seemed strange because they weren't an established organization or anything.
Right.
So, I mean, usually when that happens, that in itself can set off some alarm bells. But things seem to be going pretty well. There was also a lot of rumors about Keen wanting to leave, and he was linked with, the former LMQ possibly going. And there was a lot of talk that he might be looking for a way out because, he wasn't really enjoying the playing environment. And that would set alarm bells ringing. Yeah, actually, Gravity have been, they've done really well considering they're a newly promoted team under new, inexperienced ownership, and allegedly with a roster that at one point wasn't getting along. So can you tell us how all of these things have kind of, that are in the background might be affecting the team? Is there any observations you've made about any of those things?
I know. Okay, so anything that happened prior to me joining, I'm completely oblivious to it. I did not follow the challenger scene. I didn't really follow NA. I followed NA up until, I followed NA up to analytics. That was it. I followed results. I followed, if there was a really big match, and that was basically it. Because my time was coaching an EU LCS team. So basically, since I joined the team, I guess I will say this is that like everything in the house is fine, right? Keen in particular, when we do speak about the game or anything, it's in Korean. I mean, if that means anything, I don't know. So I guess like he does want to get better. Keen is one of those players that is abstract. If I'm to like give a StarCraft analogy or something, he's not your Flash. The mechanical Leviathan that just like bulldozes through you with raw strength, right? He's the player that he has really good mechanics and stuff, but he's also really wonky and all over the place. Like cheesy Protosses can be and stuff. And that's completely fine. To each his own. And so that's pretty much that. Okay. I other than that, I don't know too much. So I don't want to comment on it. As far as the ownership and stuff, even though the owner is young and that obviously he comes from money, as his AMA said, and if you just do a quick Google search and stuff, I think he's also very disciplined, and I also think he's extremely mature for his age. So it's not like he's just a loose cannon. You know what I mean? And I'm sure that Steve. Liquid, the former Curse owner. I'm sure he did his research. So, yeah.
So, I mean, in general, how have you felt about the Gravity performances? They're 7-7. comfortably mid-table, joint fifth at the moment. I think that's actually quite a respectable placing for a newly promoted side, and one that is still effectively developing. Team Coast have had an absolutely abysmal season, but they're above WinterFox, Dignitas, and kind of stable mates, if you like, Team Liquid as well. So I think it's been a good start. How have you felt? Do you feel they're underachieving right now, overachieving a little bit, or do you feel that they're where they should be in the grand scheme of things?
I I'm not happy with myself. Basically, there's a lot more I want to do, but obviously, commuting between Seoul and LA makes it very difficult. Also, there has to be I've only been with the team a month and a half, right? And the funniest thing is, if we go back to Stout yesterday, whatever, how we referenced that somehow a coach is supposed to come in and you're supposed to see changes like that.
Yeah.
No, because you have to break down bad habits, you have to break down bad beliefs, you have to remold everything. Like Samsung Blue didn't just get put together and then fucking win an OGN. Like that's not how it works. Ozone took a year and a half before they did anything. In Korean houses, you basically, at least in Kespa houses, you have a year basically to make it or break it. In terms of talent and other types of stuff. So it's nonsensical for people to think that Gravity was supposed to have this gigantic metamorphosis over the course of 3 weeks of working with me, especially because we lose out 2.5 days each time I travel and whatever. But I want to say that by summer split you'll see a lot, because at that point I'll be living with the team full time. And then I'll be out there, I'll be able to basically enforce a lot of the other things that I want to do that I kind of can do remotely, but I can't do it remotely at the same time. And yeah, I guess. So we're fine right now. We're in fifth. I don't think that there's any reason we can't just be top four right now, to be completely honest. On any given day, though, respectively. Team Liquid's a good team. I guess WinterFox, Tip are pretty close. The middle of the pack is relatively close, and then you have TSM, CLG. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Cloud9 if they can find themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah.
We'll talk a little bit about the sort of makeup of NA and the NALCS a little bit in the second half of the show, so we will revisit that. But I want to talk a bit about you. You've already said there that you're traveling between Seoul and LA. I imagine that's very grueling, very tiring. Yeah, I can imagine. But you're making it work. So just I wanted to get your thoughts about almost the requirement of having to do that because of these new rules that Riot brought in. I know that when they first brought the rule in and saying a coach has to be there on broadcast day and you need to be present with the team to pick some bands and you need to be on stage. I know that you were one of the guys that was like, look, I am going to relocate if I can get a job eventually, but I'm locked into a tenancy agreement in Seoul. They ain't cheap. I got to honor that and then I can come out. And you spoke with Riot about maybe getting a dispensation so that you would be allowed to maybe not be there on match days, and of course they declined that. They're very big on wanting the coaches present. So right. What do you think of that rule, and why do you think Riot is so adamant to have it in place?
The rule I think is not necessary. I think if you want to come season 6 and you want to do a little bit of Doto 2, where the coach actually stays in the game. You know what I mean? He can only see the vision of his team, and I've heard that actually exists in some tournaments. If that happens, then yes, being on stage is crucial. Being on stage for a pick and ban is not, okay? Because if you prepared, with your head out of your ass, then you come equipped to each pick and ban phase with 10 to 15 different possible pick and bans. And because the meta is so, simplified, you know what I mean? There's 5 mid laners, there's 6 top laners, there's 480 carry, it's really not hard to guess and play around with a generalized theory how a pick and ban will go. That's how Samsung used to do it. That's how CJ did it. And that's basically what I took it from. If people go into picks and bans with a general theory and like they don't have anything planned or like whatever, then I mean that's their own fault. Coaches being on stage, I don't think is really like necessary, especially because they don't promote the coach. I mean, they promote the coach with like a little title below the team when it shows up on the Riot thing. There's no photo, there's no official recognition outside of that, and like all this other stuff. So we'll see if it changes as time moves forward. But I think the November coaches was a pretty, I don't know, like. I'm undecided on it. The thing with me where I was told that I could coach remotely and that I would be immune to that was because basically Monte Cristo and I were the grandfathers, you know what I mean, of coaches, or me, Monte Cristo, Loco, right? We were the big three, I guess. I guess you can include Skara because he was coaching Dignitas as well, but you know that was like kind of known and whatever. But basically. I was told in September around Worlds that I would be granted immunity from that rule. And I asked to confirm that with the manager of the time. Now, again, we're dealing with MYM management, okay? So.
Oh, don't worry. We're coming to MYM.
Like,
we're coming to MYM. Don't worry about that.
Oh, we're going to fucking. All right. So that's what I was told. And then in November, when I was like starting to panic and stuff, like what the hell's happening, blah blah blah. I'm trying to get messages from yours truly, Big Sorry, Sebastian. All right, and he wouldn't fucking reply to me. So I didn't know what was going on. I was trying to coordinate with Riot Aporson, the EU LCS coordinator guy, and basically I think it was determined. I may be wrong, and if I am wrong, I take full blame for this. So don't like quote me or whatever. Whoever did ask the Riot employee did not have authority to ask that, and whatever Riot employee apparently did say it wasn't eligible to say it. Basically,
yeah,
they weren't able to grant it because it became this issue with okay, what Riot employee even said it, and that took like 3 weeks just to get a hold of the guy that asked, like on behalf of us, you know, and so that's what happened. And then, you know, classic MLM, you know, they have me on as a coach September through December, and then they release me 2 weeks before LCS, you know? But I don't even get released by them. I get released by Selfie telling me. So, God bless that.
So I like this is a side issue. We'll just talk about it briefly while we're here. And I've made this point several times. It feels to me that this idea of having a coach on stage and standing behind the team, and I find it quite laughable in some cases, and I'll tell you why. You know, I've seen the coaches stood behind them and they've got their books out and they're reading and the pages are blank. You know, I've seen that. We've all seen that. I've seen. Sorry, go on.
No. Some of them, it's funny because like you'll look on stage and it's almost like they're not talking. You never see their lips moving.
Yeah.
And it's like
what are they actually doing
behind the players? They're like, oh, okay, guys, you feel good about that pick? You feel you want it? Great. Hey guys, great. Yeah, okay, great, all right. Like
it's a prop. That's what they feel like to me. They feel like, Riot. I get why they've done it. Okay, there's many wins for Riot here. First of all, by having a coach there with a clipboard, it makes it comparable to real sports. Obviously, you have coaches there. We've all seen pictures of NFL coaches, covering their mouths so the lip readers up in the fucking stands don't get them, and they're holding a clipboard and they're doing the plays. It looks like a real sport. You think, wow, this guy must be super smart. He's running an NFL team. He's got to, tell all those tactics to the players. Wow, this is serious. So I get why that's there. It's a very effective prop. But ultimately, again, I think it comes down to the idea that, as we saw with the Incarnation situation with SK Gaming, Riot wanted to be able to say who organizations employed that they would associate with League of Legends. So it was really about, well, we're going to pay them the money, but we now get to say who can and can't be a coach because they have to come to our studio, they have to be part of our broadcast, they have to be on stage. So ultimately, it was a control thing. That's how I see it. I mean, do you disagree with that?
I don't know. Well, okay, Riot, I think, is actually, like, I think they're doing what they... Basically, okay, so let me outline this with an example. Basically, some coaches have messaged me recently, right, from various regions or just, Challenger Series, whatever, and they complain that like the balance changes that Riot keeps doing, right? Where they reduce the global gold, and they make it harder to end the game, right? That's a trend, okay? And I don't think Riot is stupid, in the sense that obviously if you have a game where a Katarina can get a first blood and somehow the lane is over, you know what I mean? Just due to global gold and how a lane will play out due to snowball mechanics, etc. It doesn't become an entertainment sport. And basically what ends up happening is you have these 20 to 30 minute games every single time. You don't even get these 40, 50 minute, 1 hour games. Riot is trying to promote in my opinion, I'm not speaking on behalf of Riot and I don't know what they're thinking. I think Riot is trying to promote the longevity of League of Legends so it does not burn out in 3 to 5 years due to some other game that rises up and people are like, oh, League's old. No. They need the games to actually go long. That's like actually a matter of fact. They need the games to go 45, 50 minutes. So that it matches realistic sports in some way. And that doesn't mean that some teams are not still going to force 20-minute surrenders. I mean, we see teams forcing 17-minute surrenders. We see teams still winning in 25 minutes, no problem. Like it can still happen the same way that a baseball team can be up 15 runs by the second inning. And like it's completely fine. So I think Riot's everything they're doing is for the longevity of their game. And to me, that sounds completely fine.
Yeah, that absolutely is. I still say I've got a few concerns about it because for me, what we need to remember here is that the organizations that participate in the League of Legends system, in the LCS system, they're not franchises. They're not extensions of Riot. They're actually organic businesses in their own right that enter a team into their tournament. And they have other teams for other games and other players and other staff. And when it starts to overlap and get to the point where it's like a separate entity to that business gets to dictate who you can and can't employ, this is where I think the waters are a little bit muddy. I mean, for example, I do these shows. I've had several. I like talking to coaches. Actually, I often prefer talking to coaches to players. I think they've got a little bit more to say a lot of the time. Stout, not being a particularly good example of that, but in general, people like yourself, Monte Cristo, lots to say, lots going on upstairs. It's great. But the amount of coaches that have said to me, "I can't come on a show. We have to clear everything with Riot now that we're coaches. Now that we're recognized coaches by Riot." And I've had people who have come on the show and they've gone, man, I got grilled hard and I got told by Riot, don't talk about this, don't mention this, don't mention that. That kind of feels a little bit almost self-defeating. Like if you
told me this before, Richard. No, I'm kidding.
I don't know if I mean, again, obviously this hasn't applied to you, so maybe this is just newer people that they think need that kind of media training, or they think I'm going to try and trick people and trip them up. But I mean, it does seem to be the fixation for me isn't on the betterment of the game. It's on controlling people that benefit from the game. Again, I don't know if you agree or disagree with that.
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. Of course, they have to be a little bit controlling, similar to like KESPA, MLB, NFL, etc. They have to be a little bit controlling, right? The difference is that we don't have a players' union to fight said control, right?
Yeah.
Just something that I think, who was it, Snoopy? I don't know how to say it. Has talked about in the past. The other thing about that or whatever. Geez, I'm losing my train of thought. Riot benefit of the game.
Controlling coaches, telling them what they can and can't say on shows.
Oh, it's gone. Oh my God. No, geez, what just happened, Richard?
That's all right. Riot had put a chip in the back of your head when you took the job, and you were just having a thought, and they were like, abort, press the button, and the electrodes just went into your brain, and that's it, conversation over. Look, I don't want to put you on the spot, so fuck it. That's my shit. Okay. I'll talk. I'll move away from that, and like I said, the button has been deployed, so that's a sign to move on. Okay, so next thing that I want to talk about, and I think this is probably something you're going to enjoy talking about, and it leads us nicely on to the break, is just how somebody like yourself, who has all of these plaudits, is recognized as being really good at what they do. Guys like Monte Cristo out there vouching for you. Guys like Thorin out there vouching for you. Every player you've worked with perhaps the exception of Ocelot, is saying good things about you. And and saying, actually, this guy did help improve my game. There's lots of testimony from even non-professional players that you're very good at what you do. Yet it seemed to me for the longest period of time, you really struggled to settle down and kind of hold on to a job, if you like. I mean, there's this perception about you. Like I've written a couple of stories like, LS leaves this team or LS leaves that team, and everyone goes, lol, again. And, you've been associated with so many teams in such a short space of time. And this is the first time, I think, where, actually this is going to work out for you and it's going to be a long-term gig and you're going to last a full split and maybe you'll go somewhere else afterwards or maybe you'll stay, who knows. But why has it been so difficult for you?
All right, well, okay, so I guess all right. Now, hold on, because Travis did this as well, and I spoke to him about it. MYM and SHC are the same team, right? That's not arguable. Okay. Gamers 2, I technically did not work for. I was a coach for hire, right? Because they did not bring me on. So people can't say I'm actually with Gamers 2. Even when I was with Gamers 2, there's documentation that still shows that technically I'm still with SHC throughout the month of August. Even if you look at the chat logs with Ocelot and Gamers 2, I actually say that to him, that through the month of August, I'm able to be hired and I'm able to be freelance for any other team, but technically SHC still retains me. You had Stout, the wonderful guy, claim that SHC, couldn't work with me, they couldn't, stand me, and they wouldn't even, they would rather lose their spot at Worlds than fucking work with me, or whatever, like that asinine shit that obviously is made up. Even though they bring me back in for relegation, and there's the chat logs of them asking me to come back as like an emergency, and like you have Impaler going out in interviews saying that I know too much about the game to be healthy. You have Selfie even to this day that advocates that I'm the most knowledgeable about League and stuff. You had Selfie risking his fucking career to work with me again. Like I don't know. Anyways, but people don't put two and two together. So with SHC and MYM, so I stayed with them for 9 months, right? Technically, or no, 8 months. And so I don't think that's really team hopping. I've done a lot of freelance work because who's not going to do freelance work for challenger teams or fives teams for 200 an hour? Of course I'm gonna, you know what I mean? You want it, you want 4 hours of review? Sure, give me almost $1,000. Like, I'll give you work, I'll tell you what you're doing wrong, take it or leave it. Like, but that doesn't mean that I'm with the team. The thing with Roar is that I was brought on under certain stipulations, and once the team lost in the NA Challenger Series, a lot of the agreements that we came on, like basically what I joined under, was no longer there. And so there was this question that would I move forward with them or not? And I said, okay, if these two things are met, or if these conditions are met, then I would be willing to continue. If not, then I think it's in both of our best interests to just part ways. And then I was also at the point in February where I was content with just quitting League. I could still coach people in the public, and then I would just play poker. And that was completely fine. And
well, I actually thought you were going to go down that road at one point. It felt like, I mean, it really felt that it wasn't just something to say for the purposes of drama, like some people do. Some people they go on Twitter and they're like, oh, maybe I'm gonna quit, my motivation's low, I'm gonna retire, and it's just drama bait. So people basically say to them, oh, don't quit, we love you, and then they go, oh, guess what I've decided, guys. And it's like an attention seeking thing. When you did it, I actually thought, fuck it, he's actually gonna quit. He's actually legit gonna go and coach poker.
Yeah, I had enough. Basically, like, with poker and my story and everything, I never was able to properly return to poker because I didn't have a bankroll, right? But now that's fucking the least of my worries. Bankroll is like irrelevant, right? So I could go back to poker. If I am with poker, then kind of like what Monte Cristo said in his recent interview at IEM, that my career is not at the hands of teenagers. Do you know what I mean? Like they look for someone to blame, throw them under the bus, whatever. So like, coaching can be risky in some senses. I don't really see it as a risk. The issue with me is that it was public knowledge that I did turn down some LCS teams, and I turned down a lot of teams, in January and February. People just seem to think that like I wasn't getting offers, but that's not true. The difference is I don't want to join a team where I don't believe that the players and my personalities will mesh well. I don't think the coaching methods will work with them simply because they'll just want to play scrims and then fucking sit on CS:GO for 6 hours, you know, and all this other type of stuff. And basically, like what I said to MYM, is in the end, I'm not gonna serve you fucking McDonald's because that's what you want. You're gonna get the steak and you know the meal that took 45 minutes because you're incapable of clearly retaining the information. Or you know, just fucking have your McDonald's because basically, I mean, I guess we'll eventually touch on this soon, so I'll just leave that for that. But I basically, when a team would talk to me and I would talk to a team, I would tell them this is how it's gonna go. This is what I want to do. If the players don't agree, if even one player doesn't agree, it's a no-go.
Yeah.
And so that's that. Like,
so
I think that's the best way.
Here's the thing I'm going to just bring up, because obviously this has been a very serious exchange. We've been very articulate and erudite in our points. It's been actually quite educational interview so far. So it's time for me to just throw a grenade in there before we go to half time. So everyone obviously comes back after the show. That's how it works. That's the mechanics of being a good host. So, and don't worry, it's not the super incendiary shit. We'll get on to MYM in the second half. But let's talk about Raw. Now, here's my perception of Raw. This is where everyone's going to be like, fuck Richard. It seemed to be a collection of misfits in a lot of ways. And by that, I don't mean on a personality basis. I like everyone who was associated with that team. But they all seem to be people that were, you know, had failed to kind of bed in with other teams. You know, like Chaoxs, for example, who just kept on trying and trying and trying. It's like, dude, please, you know, come on now. You know, and then it was, you know, people that had been sort of rejected by Riot, like, you know, Froskurinns, people like that who, you know, were clearly on the shit list that we all know exists. And it just seemed, you know, and obviously Kori, who had been driven out of the MYM gaming house, you know, by all of these, like, you know, those crazy managers that they had over there. And then you ended up associated with that team, and I was like, Nick, no, dude, this can't be a good political move for you. So did you have any like concerns when you were like aligning yourself with this sort of collection of people? And is that perception that I have, that it was like the goofy misfit team, is that completely wrong? Am I like out, you know, am I off limits? Am I out of my mind saying that?
Okay, well, all right. So Froskurinns requested that I be brought in. That was how they went about contacting me. Once I came in, I talked to Chaoxs, and I got the entirely wrong perception of who he was as a player, basically. I think as a person, he's okay, you know, whatever. I think most people are, you know, and even if you're not, I'm not going to hold a grudge or anything. But basically, it came into the team with like 6 days before the fucking Challenger Series match. And these players were basically led to believe the most random bullshit that was just like, it was basically like, I don't even know what to say. Like, me and Chaoxs did not get along because it was just actually like insanity. Like he would say that the team was really good at team fighting, and I would pull up like 5 VODs of them fucking getting rolled 12k gold ahead. And I'm like, yeah, you're really good at team fighting. Like, you know. And then there would be the advocates for the rotational style of play where we would starve them and we would fucking just, you know, run around the map and play refugee and like, you know, guerrilla warfare. And they would win more games like that than they would win trying to do this Chinese team fighting. And whatever, because in order to do it, you know, the Chinese method of, you know, blitzkrieg and fucking team fights, you actually have to have mechanics, you know, that's able to, you know, walk the walk. So if that's the issue, then, you know, whatever. So there was disagreements in the team. There was also our top laner who was like 88 and 67 Platinum 1 when everyone else was Challenger, you know, who was scouted and brought over from Korea. And clearly, I mean, we don't have proof. We thought it, that someone played on his account for the test games in Korea. That's what we actually think. And he fucking plays like Heimerdinger, Karthus, and like Scion because like even if you die, you're still kind of useful. You know what I mean? Yeah. So we can't really field him. And then to open this can of worms, we find out that he's directly affiliated with Andy Shin. Now, Andy Shin also has a team inside of Challenger Series called the Dragon Knights, right?
Yeah.
So now there's there's this really big can of worms, ganked by Korean, because if you know, or you may not know, but Thorin knows about the situation where I had to get law enforcement involved because of Andy Shin
Yeah,
in the
I
summer
did,
of
I did,
2014.
I did hear about this.
Okay.
But I mean,
Um,
feel free to tell everybody. I mean, so if you
well,
want
the
to.
guy is fucking insane. So first off, his all right. So he embellishes and he fabricates, right? That's number one.
Mm,
Number two, he will create like fake personalities to hold conversations with himself, to better, further his point in some way. And then he's extremely, I don't even know if it's like a business move or what. Basically, he fronts being fluent in English. And
mm,
his English understanding is very, very well. The issue is that he can't pull emotion from the words. And so when you're talking with him, he's using these words that native English speakers would find offensive, or they would, they'd be very uncomfortable with how he's speaking. Um, and so it can agitate you. And so like when I was speaking to him, he wanted me to test Narakyle because we were holding tests for mid lane for SHC and stuff, and he was like trying to force Narakyle onto me. Like
mm.
he's like trying to tell me all these things. And before I even spoke to Andy, who was Narakyle's agent or whatever, I was gonna test Narakyle. It wasn't even the question about that. But I'm like looking up Narakyle's stats on Korea, and I'm like, 44% win rate on Yasuo, 42 on Oriana. He's got 41% here, 33%. And then his Jace is 67%. And I'm like, okay, so what you're telling me is if we bring him here, they ban Jace, and then he's like, well, I don't know what to do. I think these guys are hacking. Like, I don't even know, like, what the
Script.
fuck. So anyways, because of the way that I ended up talking to him, just because of the nonsense and like the fact that I brought in my own translator, because I'm like, look, if this person is gonna test for my team, I want my translator, who is native in both languages, doing the translations. I don't want you saying anything to him because I know that you will embellish and you will fabricate to him things that I'm saying, to which he did. Anyways, he actually makes these physical and verbal threats, and the issues with this is that Korea, Imp, for example, was beaten up when he was on his way to the mini mart, simply because he called Piglet bad in solo queue. Like, Korea's really fucking serious. So Andy like copy pastes my address, and at this time I'm living with Scarlet, and like he like writes all this other fucking shit that's just like full blown crazy. Like I don't even know. And he justifies it because I speak to him in a rude manner and tell him to shut the fuck up. And because he actually tells me in one of the transcripts that Narakyle is better than Faker if Narakyle is playing Jace. No Richard, like I couldn't deal with it. It was like, honestly, it was like I was talking to my 13-year-old self. Like I just couldn't fucking, I was like, Lastshadow, please, like, So anyways, that ends up happening, and then all this other fucked up shit. So anyways, we find out that the top laner is directly related with him, and then it becomes a question of will he intentionally throw?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that's a real thought. Not only in my mind, it's in the owner's mind. It's in two of the players' minds. And it's like, well, what the fuck do we do? So we end up fielding Acadian just because like there were Skype chat logs. Because I said, okay, look, when he goes to sleep, you get on that computer, you open up Skype, you send me the Korean, I'm going to have someone translate it. The conversation between the two. Because I'm not fucking around. Like, if there's an NA challenger, like, something is just really shady. And I wouldn't put it past Andy Shin to fucking plant bombs in teams. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
He's like, yeah, I'm your big bro, I'm your young, I'm 10 years older than you, holding, friendships with 16-year-old. Like, fucking really weird. So I didn't put it past him, and I did not want to leave that to chance. I also did not want to leave the kid getting angry because I would never let him play Heimerdinger or Karthus, and he's fucking 16, 17, and he's like, I'll show you, Lastshadow, like, I don't know. So I couldn't do that. So that's what happened with Roar. The pick and ban phase, a lot of people comment on it because it's a complete atrocity, right? Because, like, list was open. And, like, to which I fucking tweeted, and I wrote this, like, laundry list response to fucking Froskurinns. And I'm like, what do you want me to do when we need 6 fucking bans against our own team? Like, if your top laner can't play Lissandra, can't play Kassadin, can't play Aurelia, can't play Gnar, can't play Lulu, can't play what do you want me to do? You want me to put them on that fucking champion so they feed like they're trying to solve world hunger? No, I'm not going to do that. What the fuck? I have to work the picks and bans to our strengths so that we have the best chance we have. Like, that's only logical. But you have, you have the public opinion, the drunkards at the fucking bar cursing at the TV screen because they know NFL better than the coaches. And they're like, oh, Lastshadow, your picks and bans were fucking terrible. But they have no idea what's going on internally. They have no idea that fucking, Chaoxs is dealing less damage than in team fights,
Yeah,
and like...
I mean, seriously, I knew Raw was a clusterfuck. I mean, right from the get-go, though, and I talked to Froskurinns about it. I got a lot of respect for her. I really like her as an individual, and I was just like, this team is a fucking shambles. And I was continually hearing that Chaoxs actually believed he should be the coach, that he should be like a player coach.
Oh yeah, oh yes. Oh yes. I think Chaoxs is very solid. I think he can be top challenger, scene AD carry. I think he can be bottom of the barrel LCS AD carry. If you're holding his hand. With that being said, he was holding back because he has this mindset that is just like nonsensical. It's like, okay, so it goes back to what I said before, right? Where I would like bring up 5 VODs and I'm like, okay, here, you had 16k gold lead, you lost the team fight. And I pull up another VOD, I'm like, you have 9k gold lead, you lost the team fight. I pull up another team VOD where he won't attack the tower because he says that he's gonna get killed, and I'm like, this isn't solo queue. Your team's gonna actually protect you. They do that, like he's like, no, I can't, and it's like, what in the fuck? So like, with that being said, okay, he just has this view of the game that is really bad, and it's like, it's not even that it's bad and it has some logic to it. It's just bad. Like, yeah. It's like in StarCraft 2, right? You have like the Koreans and like, they show everything. Then you had like Stefano back in that era, right? And then you're like, no, actually, I'm gonna go Lin Bangling every game. Actually, that's the way to play, And it's like, they become the rough of StarCraft 2, and that's like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how he can view the game the way that he does whilst being a veteran. I also think it's a little bit Dunning-Kruger if, he truly thinks that way. And I have no problem saying this because apparently he pinned the entire blame on me and he said a lot of shit.
Yeah. I mean, it was, fuck, there was, it was the whole... It was everyone's fault, like he was surrounded by amateurs and people who didn't understand the game. Yeah. It was nothing to do with him. Yeah. So I think it's incredible, really, considering how far he's fallen since he announced that retirement of his to where he is now, and he still doesn't suspect that maybe it's something to do with him. I'm astounded by that. I've asked him directly to come on this show. I've wanted to interview him and ask him about it. Yeah, well, of course, yeah, fucking most people are, Nick. Anyway, so what we'll do is I think that was the hand grenade. Boom, you threw yourself on it admirably. We'll take a quick break. We'll fill up our glasses, and I'll get another cup of tea and everything. So we'll be back in about 5 minutes. Just want to say, we're probably going to run some ads, but this will make you laugh. Sam's hovering in the background, our producer. He's going to piss himself at this. So we did Trash Talk last night. It was a 2.5-hour show. It was an epic roller coaster ride of, dick pics and other nonsense. It was a good fucking show. We had a lot of fun doing it. And I checked my little partnership tab on the dashboard today. That show, which had, about 1,300 people watching it. Do you know how much we made for that 3 hours in total time it cost us? 1 cent.
That's impressive, Richard.
What? I know. How the fuck do we do it? Like, how do we make so little money? 1 cent. Not even 1 cent. We're rounding up. We made 0.86 of a cent.
Oh, Jesus. You still managed to receive more money from that broadcast than I did from Carlos Rodriguez. So, I mean, I guess you got that going for you, right? Like,
yes. But, mate, if only we had a drum roll soundboard for you. But anyway...
Just for the chat, Nara Kyle is actually a really good player. Nothing I was saying, now he's, really good and stuff. I just want to outline that for the chat. Nara Kyle is, a fine person and stuff. I'm just, Andy Shin's fucking cuckoo. So, all right, good.
It's awesome. So we'll take a quick 5-minute break, guys. If you want to watch the ads, maybe we can beat 1 cent for this show. Maybe we can make a whole 2. We'll be back in 5. Thanks for watching. Hi, and welcome back to First Blood. That was just a short break. We've all got fed and watered, and of course, guest here has had very little sleep, and he's got a long night of scrims ahead of him. So we want to get straight back into the action. I am, of course, talking about LS, the current coach at Gravity. It's been an explosive roller coaster ride of analysis and anecdotes so far, and now we're going to get into something that's certainly a bit more juicy than even the stuff we've already talked about. So we had to talk about this at some point, Nick. I just want to get it out the way. MYM.
Okay.
Boom. So first of all, I know you've had some less than pleasant dealings with that organization. Certainly that, and they're not exactly on my Christmas card list for the way they've treated players in the past and the way they've conducted themselves. They've been doing incredibly badly in the European LCS at the moment, and some people have theorized that that's possibly down to the negative environment, players not enjoying themselves. They're currently rock bottom on 3 for 11. Now, as somebody that's had dealings with that organization, worked with those players, is it surprising for you that they're right down there? Can you identify any problems they might be having? Do you think the team, talent-wise, is better than 10th in the European LCS?
Okay. All right. So problems MYM's having. Well, first off, there was a few decisions that was made without my, I guess, input at all that I did not agree. I did not agree with the removal of costing. Eventually, it got basically pinballed between a few people, and then the decision was to remove them. That was the first major thing I did not like. After that, okay, so it's down to me, Mimer, Rawless, and Selfie, which I think is completely fine. Like, we can easily get 2 players and do something, which is conceivable and everything. They end up getting the team together and whatever in December, and then scrims just start abruptly. And as far as the management perspective, like you already reported, I couldn't even get a hold of the management for like a month. Okay, I was basically reliant on Michael Schnorr, the former manager of SHC, who still did stuff for MYM, but not in an official status. And if not for him, I probably wouldn't even fucking know anything, nor would the players. Like, he did so much for the team, even though like that he wasn't getting paid and he wasn't official. Like, just a really good guy. Basically, the issues with the team, it boils down to personality conflicts, the drama. Are they better than 10th? Yes and no. Like, yes/no, but like with an asterisk. Like, there's conditions as to why that is. It's funny though, because most people can't see the real issues within the team. And they relate it to this other stuff. They relate it to the management, and they relate it to the drama, the roster swaps, et cetera, et cetera. The big problems is Selfie, like, let me just use stuff that the public, if they actually put the jigsaw pieces together, okay, like you can deduce on your own. Selfie is willing to risk his entire EU LCS career to leave said team because said team will not bring back on a coach, but they have a coach. So what the fuck, what's the issue, okay? Then Selfie, there's obviously other stuff going on beyond the scenes, and then Selfie goes to America to work with said coach, right? Being me or whatever. And during that time, Selfie also responded on his Ask FM. You can go to askfm.free_Kori or whatever. There was some people that did not like me being on the team. Okay, now if you have Rawless, there was that screenshot that was posted during the Ocelot thing where Rawless says, he's the best coach you'll have. He always knows what to do. Blah 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 blah. The problem with him, though, is, sometimes he gets, like, depressed and stuff and, like, whatever, okay? Which is, it's fine. It's true, So you have Rawless saying that. You have Selfie, who refers to my game knowledge as, like, godlike. Like, literally, he said that in an interview. You had Impaler, who went out and credited me. You have other EU pros that have gone on the record and said stuff, most notably Incarnation, who was deemed, like, the best European player at one point last year. You have all this other stuff, and then you have Mimer, who has said good stuff about me and whatever. Okay, so now I guess who are the new players to the team that statement could possibly be about? Well, okay, so you have the new support, the new jungler, and the new coach. Okay. Basically, what would end up happening, and this is what I referenced about the McDonald's versus the cooked meal. okay, is I would teach them something, okay, and I would just spend 5 minutes teaching them it, and a week of scrims would go by, and the same mistake keeps coming up, even though I can break it down, I can reverse engineer it, and I can show why it's bad. So I would speak for 20 minutes, and I would give references to Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, anything you can, because this is my belief, okay? Is if you have like, so here's your brain, right? Like you have like your brain, okay?
Yes.
And if you only have one memory that has to get to the front of your head to make you remember what you're supposed to do, sometimes that memory can get clogged. You know what I mean? Like
right.
you can get blocked and you don't remember. But if you have 10 fucking different things that is all around the same topic, it's a network system, right? And this is the reason that I use so many analogies and I try to relate to people. Do you know Magic? Do you know Yu-Gi-Oh? Do you know chess? Do you know poker? Do you know, and that's what I try to do. I try to find something they can relate to. If they don't, but I know it makes a lot of sense and it's easy to understand, then I try to go on that. And basically some of them didn't like that, okay? Because they felt like it was taking too long. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, well, if it's taking too long, then how come you're incapable of doing it the first time I tell you? Like, it's not very hard to put two and two together. So that was some of the issues with me that Selfie came out and spoke about. And that's also the issues that I just mentioned to you, is that I won't work with the team if they want to fucking be lazy or if they want to be ignorant, to certain stuff or certain topics.
So who would you say were the main offenders of that? I mean, can you say who the main offenders were?
No.
Who, in your opinion,
I'm not gonna do that.
I feel I can safely say Kori wasn't one of them, right? So
Kori wasn't one. I mean, we can safely deduce that Rawless wasn't one.
Right.
Safely deduce Mimer wasn't one.
Okay, so that only leaves two other people.
You're left to three.
Sorry, three. Sorry, my bad. Maths isn't my strong point. Right. So, well, here's a question. Just while we're here, is it possible that I don't know, like, is it acceptable at any point to reject a particular coaching style as a player, or do you believe that you should always, at least, if someone is a coach in name, a coaching role, the players should actually kind of bow down, have a little bit of deference, and listen to what the coach is trying to say? Or do you think, as a player, if you don't particularly like a coaching method, it's actually okay to say, yeah, this isn't working for me. It's working for some of my other teammates, but it's not working for me? Because I know from my time coaching, not everybody responds to a set style, and the onus, certainly in business management and that kind of thing, and business coaching and sports coaching, the onus is on the person doing the coaching to find that person's learning style and to maybe change the methodology a little bit to suit them rather than vice versa.
Well, it becomes a question. You can't help those who don't want to be helped, right? So if, they're like because there's this question Artosis asked me when I first came to Korea. He said, do you like being a pro gamer, or do you like the idea of being a pro gamer? Okay? And what that means is, do you like the idea of having fans, interacting with people, playing a game at the highest level, etc.? And having that fan base and, popular, and you're someone at something, or do you actually want to invest the 16 hours a day, replay watching, breakdown, etc.? Like, do you really want it, or do you like the idea of it? It's a pretty good idea to actually be Justin Bieber. You know what I mean? Like, well, maybe some people would disagree, but you can't disagree with the fact that the kid has millions upon millions of dollars. He has tons of people at his fucking beck and call. You know what I mean? And he's basically immune to law in some ways. Like, I'm just using him as a reference. I could use any celebrity. It's a nice idea to be him. But do you actually want to be him? You have to go into fucking dance studios probably 8 hours a day sometimes. You have to constantly be keeping up with your complexion and doing all this other stuff. You have to constantly be following trends, come up. That's a lot of fucking stress. You see a lot of celebrities resort to fucking drugs and like other types of shit and whatever. And on the outside looking in, it looks like they have the perfect life, but when you're actually in, then it's not so perfect, Yeah. Like when I was gonna quit League of Legends, people were like, oh, so many people would kill to have your game knowledge or be able to coach like you and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, it's just basic to me, man. Like, it doesn't, the same way that, like, a lot of people were probably dumbfounded by, like, Albert Einstein or something, way back in the day. Albert didn't think of himself as, like, spectacular. You know what I mean? He's like, no.
Yeah.
That's how it actually is. Right.
Working as a patent clerk, wasn't he? So.
Right.
But look, so
But
I want to get back into the MYM thing. Just while we're kind of floating around, poking
yeah.
the food around our plate. So Kori was I know you and him have a great relationship. I've always found him to be an agreeable chap. I think he was in a terrible situation, and I was really happy I was able to bring that to light and put MYM into a situation where they have to act more responsibly, and they removed the manager that did that awful shit to him. But here's the thing. Um, that in the past, people have alleged that actually Kori within a team, his attitude can be difficult. There was a lot of talk back in the SHC days that one of the reasons Impaler was effectively pushed out of that team was that Kori and him just couldn't get along, and Kori said it's him or me, basically. Now, I have no idea if that's true, if Kori's that kind of guy. Perhaps you can give us some insight into that because, Kori's a young player. He's a young guy. Sometimes people like that can be emotional. And I think in light of the MYM thing, people are almost making a martyr out of him when, and giving him these, like, oh, he's so altruistic, he's such a nice human being, when in actual fact, maybe he's been responsible for some of the issues in past teams. What's your take on that? What's your perspective?
Okay, so with Selfie, he has a work ethic I don't see in most players. Not just in League of Legends, but across all games. He will literally sit there with replays open of Apto, Faker, Nanye, Kuro. He'll watch all these players, he'll slow-mo it, he'll go back. He will do the stuff that you want players to do, but they won't. You know what I mean? He's also very confident, and he has every right to be. He's like, what is he now? He's 18. He just turned 18, right?
Yeah,
Like
just do.
the talent inside of that kid is immense. It's like amazing. And then he has a caloric type personality, which basically means that yes, he doesn't get along with most people that will be inside of this scene because most personality traits that you do, encounter in the scene are calorics, and it only takes, having to clash heads with one other one to cause chaos, in a small atmosphere or not. Yeah, like whatever. I think he's extremely talented. I think he's conscious of his talent. I think he's conscious of his ability, and I think he genuinely wants to be the best he can be. And when he sees others clearly holding him back, or if he sees others prohibiting him from doing so, then he lashes out in what people call an immature manner. But really, it's just like he just fucking wants to get better.
Yeah.
And then rather complain about it because you see Kori doesn't really complain publicly too much. Even the MYM thing, it was broken by reporters. He didn't even go about it. There's this quote that, you never see champions complain because they're too busy getting better. He just wants to say, okay, like Impaler doesn't work with me. That's it. And then, like find me a jungler. Like that's how it was. And from the coaching perspective and stuff, could I have fixed it? No, probably not, because the problems went beyond playing. It was personal at that point. And it's not personal in the sense of like Mata and Dandy Dade, like that trio that had issues. They swap out Dade for Pawn and then everything's fine. But it's not issues that, was personal related. It was gameplay opinion, But with Impaler, it was obviously personal. So how do you fix that? How do you fix, the fact that two people lived together for months and they can't resolve an issue and they still, they're at each other's throat? I can't fix that. I'm not going to make a 17-year-old, 16-year-old boy, change his mind, like, about how he feels about his teammate. Like, that's not going to happen. Maybe when he grows up and stuff, he'll look back and he'll be like, if I could go back, I'd do stuff differently. But that's that.
There's a lot of talk that he might be, leaving at the end of the split. I certainly will imagine that is going to happen, and I think MYM are going to disappear. They're going to get relegated, and they're not going to, they're not going to ever come
Yeah.
back. They'll never get any credible players to play for them again. And I can't say I'm sad about that. Actually, I think it would be disingenuous if I pretended I'm impartial. I do kind of feel strongly about organizations that exploit players and treat players badly. That's just how I am. That's how I've always been. So, full disclosure. But There's a lot of talk about Kori moving on already. You know, we noticed he's changed his name to Free Kori rather than MYM Kori. This implies that, you know, he's imprisoned. He needs to be freed. There was talk about him potentially going to Gambit when they were scouting Betsy. But my understanding is that he didn't want to be a stand-in player for, you know, NIQ,
Right.
who might be coming back. Do you have any idea where you think he might end up? I mean, is he destined to be part of a big LCS organization, a big LCS team?
I think if people actually do their research and they do proper scouting, which, you know, I'm not very confident that they'll do that, you know, I think he will still be alive and well in the scene. I don't think he's going anywhere, if he wants to be. In terms of like other stuff that him and I talk about, I'm not going to talk about it like on stream and stuff, you know, like stuff that goes on internally and like stuff he tells me or like stuff that we talk about and whatever. But our relationship's still really healthy. And you know, I've made it known to him, you know, Impaler, like I'm still really close with. Like I'll always help those guys. You know, if they need anything, like whatever. Like when the whole thing went on, like Corey's other alternative, instead of going back to MYM, he was gonna come live with me for like 3 months, and I was just gonna boot camp with him in Korea and fucking train him at my house, like to try to make him like the best non-Korean mid. You know, and so everything's fine in that aspect. He's still extremely young, which you have to factor in. He has a healthy career in front of him.
Yeah. Well, I hope so. And just some final thoughts. Your thoughts about the organization. I mean, you know, again, I'm hearing rumblings that there's still some money and payment issues, you know, outstanding. They're, you know, kind of trying to throw their weight around again. I don't know if you've heard any of this. I mean, do you have any thoughts about the management and the owners?
I've heard that we will be seeing more negative. Well, I'm sure that we're gonna see more negative media about MYM in coming weeks. With you know, you know exactly what I'm referencing. I do know that MYM after the dust settled, at least this is what I was told, and I have chat logs to confirm this. You know, I can show you. MYM at one point wanted me to come back. This was right before I joined Gravity.
Okay.
But it was under a lot of stipulations and like other stuff, and that was like really random. And so I told, like, basically, you know, like, unless like literally the fucking stars align, that would never happen. But I think they're all over the place and they're really desperate to retain the spot. I don't know what they'll do. Maybe they'll pull a coast. Maybe they'll buy out a challenger team and then move their best players there and roster swap, etc. You know.
Well, you know,
I wouldn't put that past them.
Yeah, I gotta say, you know, they just. I'm amazed actually after everything that happened and all the negative publicity it generated. I was amazed that they were still sort of allowed to continue in the LCS. And like you say, I think there's going to be some more skeletons come tumbling out of that closet sooner rather than later. And when it does, I think, like I say, hopefully it'll be the nail in the coffin. Like esports has got too many con artists and unethical people in it anyway. I think, you know, allowing people these second, third, fourth chances over and over again, it's a culture that really needs to stop. But anyway, let's move on. Next topic of conversation. There was a little tournament called IEM Katowice. I always get mocked. I'm apparently pronouncing that wrong, but I like the way it rolls off my tongue. But I think it might be Katowice or something. I don't know, whatever. But anyway, whatever it was called, I've been there. It's a great place in Poland, and it was a great tournament for League of Legends, and in particular for TSM, who managed to win an international tournament with Koreans in. First time a Western team has achieved that in League of Legends history. So I'm sure you were sat there watching the tournament from start to finish, and I just wanted to pick your brains about the TSM victory and ultimately what it means for TSM. Were TSM that good, or were the Koreans really bad? And what can we really glean from it, if anything?
Well, TSM is definitely exceptionally well. All their players are phenomenal at their roles. Loco's a really good coach. They also, you know, they have Reginald, you know, whatever. I don't know too much about their analysts, but I'm fully confident in Loco. They have Bjergsen, like undisputedly right now, the best mid laner outside Korea. You you know, that's including China, probably, you know, like, even if you include Chinese mids, he's, you know, TSM lived up to expectation, and they did what was necessary. Had they encountered GE Tigers, I think it would have been a different monster. I think they would have lost to GE, of course. But fortunately, you know, the Chinese billionaires might have been able to buy out fucking GE, but they forgot Reginald already is one. So, like.
Hi, we're back. Definitely not a DDoS. Everything's cool. Okay, so we were just talking about IEM Katowice just before we did get taken off air. So, Nick, you were saying just at the point where we got you down, you said that TSM performed as expected in your opinion. So, do continue with that train of thought.
Okay, so the two main things that bothered me that tournament were, number one, people saying that because GE Tigers dropped 2 games, that somehow means something. How many times have professional players... Now, StarCraft, I mean, I have to use StarCraft because that is the game with the most Korea versus the world. You know what I mean? How many times have godlike Koreans gone to an MLG only to be knocked out 2-0 by who the fuck ever? It doesn't mean anything. It is 2 games. You test into a fucking team, you play 50. Like, no, like, I can't, like, I don't know, like, either the casters are doing it for show or the analysts just actually believe that, in which case, like, fucking take them off the desk, or, like, it doesn't mean anything. Like, they lost 2 games, yeah, it's an upset. Does it mean anything? No, it's not a wake-up call for Korea. You lost 2 games at an international event. It's not the end of the world. GE Tigers doesn't have to go home and reflect. You know, it's not the end of their career. You know, it's 2 fucking games. Like, what the fuck? How many times do we see that at MLG? Like, Polt lost to fucking Gowser. You know what I mean? Like, Scarlet dropped, you know, she went 0-3 to Hendrilisk in WCS, NA. You know, when she was, like, the best non-Korean Zerg, you know, like, whatever. It happens all the time, you know? Like, it happened, like, you know, the worst baseball team's gonna beat the Yankees sometimes, you know? Like, even when the Yankees were, like, the best team in baseball. It happens. You know, Aces fucking loses to Ace-King sometimes. Like, it's okay, guys. It's not actually, like, fucking GE Tigers needs a wake-up call. No. You know? The other thing was Monte Cristo saying that Wee's performance, because they just joined together or something like that, like, was weird. No. First off, who's the shot callers? Is it Spirit? And, you know, like, is it are 2 people on the team that were unmoved? In which case, the 2 people that joined just listen together. Okay? Eastern players, like Chinese, you know, Taiwan, Korea, they have way more game knowledge than your average Western pro. That's just a matter of fact. Like, there's been pros that have come over to Korea and they've said that. You know, it was documented in Chasing the Cup, etc. Because they live, breathe, eat, and sleep LOL. You know what I mean? They don't finish a scrim set and they're like, oh, okay, let me, you know, go play CS:GO, or let me go play, you know, World of Warcraft and, like, whatever. No, they're like, League of Legends, League of Legends, League of Legends. Like, that's it. That's all they do. They know what to do. They know how to do it. No, are they going to have fancy tactics and invades and stuff set up? No, they're not going to have that. Are they going to have an understanding of what they want to do at the very late game stage? No, but Spirit or someone can probably guide them. Like, it's not that hard to take orders from your shot callers. You know what I mean? Especially if that's like... So, him, it's the only thing I disagreed with Monty on. Like, just, like, I think everyone else was, like, completely fine. Because if it was just about, you know, you throw random players into a team and they need coaching and, like, all this other stuff to be able to come together, no, that's not the case. You know what I mean? Like, if that were the case, then, you know, the current Wii lineup is better than some of the current Korean teams. You know what I mean? In LCK. Even though they just came together. Why? Because the players know what they're doing. Like, that's what it comes down to. So, like, you can't say that. You know, it's... I always fucking got up in arms about people that they looked at like a best of 3 or a best of 5 and they took it as gospel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it was like, holy shit, man. I can't, like, basically I used the do you remember CJ or was it CJ Blaze versus Moscow 5? Okay, so that was the all right. So CJ Blaze was undisputedly the best team in the world. That was inarguable. Okay. somehow Moscow 5 managed to take them down, in one set, okay? If that was the first games you had ever seen of CJ Blaze, you would think they were really bad. When in all reality, they're actually like, they don't fucking lose. They're insane, etc. But like, even the best players lose sometimes. You can't be perfect 100% of the time. It's kind of like the StarCraft 2 community, right? Like, I remember there was this parody thing where In Control was talking about Thorzane, and people kept saying that Thorzane was washed up and that his career was over. And In Control's like, so Marcus, you're telling me that you don't win 100% of the time, like, and it's like, what the fuck, like, oh man, I don't know. It makes me writh.
So, I mean, what can we really say about TSM right now? Because you know what it's like. I feel you get the League of Legends community in general. They aren't very. They're stuck in binary thinking. I think perhaps because of the average age of the people that follow the game. So you've got the TSM fans that believe TSM right now are the best team in the world and are more than a match for any Korean team out there. And all hail the conquering heroes. Loco Doco's a genius, and Lustboy is the best support in the world, and Dyrus is back, and all of that stuff. Bjergsen best mid, blah blah blah. You've read the threads, you've seen it. And on the other hand, you've got the almost like the Korean apologists, and they go so far as to say, the conditions weren't right for the Koreans. They were jet lagged. They didn't get any sleep. They're on different patches in different regions. They haven't even played the current patch. It's bullshit. Wait till Worlds. This is going to happen. NA is still trash. Now, I'm pretty sure that the truth is, somewhere in here, between those 2 points. I'm not sure where, but I'm hoping you can maybe tell me.
Wait, all right. Repeat, like, no. Wait, like, hold on.
So what I'm essentially asking you is, if you had to say, are TSM one of the best teams in the world right now, the best team in the world right now,
yes,
or
they're one of the best.
One of the best. So how highly do you rate? How highly do you rate them?
I think this TSM, I think is maybe this TSM and maybe the old Cloud9 that we knew. I think those are the 2 teams that realistically could actually potentially do stuff in LCK. Given enough time. I think they would experience, they'd come over here and they'd get their ass kicked for a little bit, but then I think they'd learn fast and they'd adapt, and then they would pick it up. I think that's what would end up happening.
Okay. Another team that was out there from NA that I'm sure you have done some homework and some scouting on in your capacity as Gravity coach was, of course, Cloud9. Now, Cloud9 sit at 3rd place in the LCS, which I think's pretty good. I think that's a good standing. Only CLG and TSM above them. But people have considered them to be a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde team, and they certainly didn't perform very well in Poland. A lot of people brought up some reasons as to why this might be, which I'm going to come to the specifics of in a moment. But what are your thoughts on Cloud9's performance?
Cloud9, I don't know. I don't really know. Like, I don't know what's going on internally. I don't know what's like. Basically, Cloud9's not like, they started off bad, you know what I mean? But anyone, like, again, it goes back to the thing that anyone can drop a few games, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's about consistency. And Cloud9's picked it up in recent weeks and stuff. And yeah, they went over to IEM. They lost to GE Tigers. So what? Like mechanical errors. If you miss a wall in StarCraft 2 and Lings run by it, oh well. Like, it sucks. It was one game. Like, you can't say anything too much about that. The other game, like, the sample size isn't big enough. Like, yeah, that's all. Like, I think Cloud9 has a ton of potential. I'm not really worried about them.
But one of the things that really stood out to me and has stood out for a while, we've talked about it on shows in the past, is high in that mid lane. Now,
Yeah.
you're a player, sorry, you're a coach that looks at individual player performances and obviously analyzes them. And you're very big, as you said earlier, getting players to play to their strengths. I'm not really sure outside of maybe shot calling what high strengths are currently, especially on the current patch. I think he's had a number of bad games. I know he's been battling some health problems,
Mhm.
but I really see him as a weak link currently in the Cloud9 team. What are your thoughts about him individually in his place within Cloud9? Do you agree that he is the weak link?
Uh, no, I don't think you can chalk it up to that, you know? Like, uh, it's really hard because like it's not just high. Mid's a 2v2 lane, you know, and obviously I'm not saying Meteos is at fault, but then it's not a 2v2 lane, then it's a 5v5 game, you know? Like there's these stages that League undergoes. Mid is not 1v1.
Okay.
Um, and so I'm not pinning any blame on Meteos. I think Meteos is a phenomenal player. But what I'm saying is that there's a lot more going on than meets the public eye,
Mm.
and they're making these statements and they're like ostracizing him, and they're basically looking for someone to blame. Okay, basically if Forgiven misses 10 CS, you know, in a tournament and he has 290 instead of 300 at 30 minutes, there's going to be a Reddit thread about it. You know, if Forgiven dies 3 times in one game instead of only, you know, twice or once, there's going to be a Reddit thread about it. Like,
Mm.
they just look for something to talk about, but they don't actually know what they're talking about because all they see is a game where this guy kills you and you kill me. That's it,
Yeah.
you know? So I think if you really wanted me to sit down and watch all of Cloud9's games and just specifically high, I could give you a better answer. But at face value, I can't give you a, you know,
That's
anything more than,
yeah,
yeah.
that's fair enough. I mean, again, I certainly don't have your depth of analysis when it comes to that, but I think that probably this will be High's last split for Cloud9, and in all honesty, I think there'll be a better team for making that decision. Come the end of the split, I think that's clearly the way it's got to go. I mean, if you're falling behind CLG, uh, given Cloud9's position in the past, that's something to be concerned about because CLG were always the kind of pretenders, and now they've looked like one of the stronger teams, certainly a lot stronger than Cloud9, which brings
Yeah.
me on to your assessment of CLG. Now, I know you're got a good relationship with Monte Cristo, and
Mhm.
I think CLG, they, for me, are the big surprise this season because I don't really see that they did a lot in terms of addressing the issues that we all knew that were there when they almost got relegated from LCS.
Yeah.
It seemed that they bringing in Zion, I think, was a good move. I think we can all agree with it. X Smithy, I was like, I don't see how this is going to work. I mean, I rated him obviously, back in the day when
Mhm.
Vulcan XDG got to Worlds and everything. I was like, he right then he was a phenomenal player, but I was like, oh, he's been out of the
Yeah.
game for a while. He has. How's this gonna go? He's actually been really effective. Then we had all of that stuff about Link. Link playing Hearthstone more than he, focusing on League of Legends. Again, as we've talked
Right.
about, wanting to play other games, not focusing on the game. There was a lot of
Right.
talk about him being tried in the jungle. They were maybe going to rejig him, but we knew he wasn't going to get kicked. And he's actually been brilliant this season. And of
Mhm.
course, bot lane, double lift and Afro Moo. I think this has been one of the splits where Rush Hour has actually lived up to its billing. So CLG
Yeah.
looking very good, but it amazes me in a lot of ways because the problems Monte Cristo we're talking about were all attitude based. About cliques in the team, work ethic. What do you know about what CLG have put right to get to where they are, being right up there in second place?
Honestly, I think because all right, so there's two parts, right, to the brain. You have the conscious, you have the subconscious, right?
Okay.
And eventually, with time comes, wisdom, but then also your subconscious gets to speak more. Um, and basically, I think all the players evolved as players over the course of the last few months, like a lot. And I'm gonna assume that Monty's impact with them for the like very long time he was with them plays a part on them all in some way. Then on top of that, they picked up Zion Spartan, right, in the top lane, and that's a powerhouse.
Yeah.
Um, That was a power pickup. And then Xsmithy, as you mentioned, and you said that you're worried about him because he's been out of the game for a while. I don't think being out of the game for a while is too detrimental when you apply the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 theory. If he wants to return to the level that he was at prior, he will use others who are currently above him, but he was above before, as scapegoats to leapfrog back to the top, by basically just seeing what they do and then, you know, restructuring that to the secrets that he already knew about his dominance, and then just fucking, you know, hopping back to the top off that. That's what they do in all games, you know, not just games, but also like other stuff. So anyways, so they picked up Xsmithy, they picked up Zion Spartan, picked up Skara as a coach, and they have Zix, I don't know how to say, maybe I'm saying his name wrong. Zix as an analyst and whatever, and now Rush Hour's like doing well. And you know, sometimes teams are not like, basically like the way that I think of CLG is I think of them as the Boston Red Sox and TSM as the Yankees. And like this is kind of the year where the Boston Red Sox, like, they're gonna be, you know, when they were down 0-3 and then they came back and they 4-3'd the Yankees, and it was like the biggest upset, and then they went on to win the World Series. That's kind of like CLG right now. Whether or not they'll get fucking, you know, whether or not they'll lose to the Yankees again is up to, like, you know, whatever's gonna happen in playoffs or whatever. But that's basically how I view them. And I think, like the Boston Red Sox, they're only gonna get better. You know?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think people obviously have perhaps forgotten, especially with all the TSM hype at the moment. CLG did pretty much comprehensively outplay TSM in that game that TSM won. You know, it was kind of almost like, dare I say it, a fluke win in a lot of ways. You know, just one error of judgment cost CLG the game. I mean, do you agree with that? You raised your eyebrows a little bit. Is that wrong of me to say that?
No. I think CL. It's weird to say. Basically, there's a discrepancy between Link and Bjergsen. You know, there is a gap there. Okay. There is a gap slightly between Meteos, or not. Jesus Christ! Oh my God. Xsmithy and Meteos, right? And then, you know, Rush Hour. You know, there's that, but in the meta, you know, it doesn't come to fruition or whatever. So basically, the longer the game goes, it's kind of like, I'll use StarCraft again because I know that you're familiar with that. The longer you go up against Flash in a 50-minute macro game, the more comfortable he gets, because it comes down to mechanics at that point. You know what I mean? At that point, the minerals are mined out on the map. You can't keep running around playing refugee and like guerrilla warfare and tagging, you know, bases and blowing them up and picking up into medevacs and run. No, that doesn't happen anymore. It's just a straight up engagement where Flash's mechanics will override you. And that's kind of like what TSM is right now. And CLG's like Fantasy was in StarCraft 1. You know, very close to Flash in terms of mechanics, but definitely had a lot more finesse and micromanagement to his playstyle that would throw people off kilter. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. I want to change tack a little bit and just move away from the NA region. We've picked your brains enough about that. And obviously, I don't want to talk about the people that are kind of closer to gravity, because, you know, they might. I don't want you to reveal anything that may impact on your chances of winning games against people that, you know, you really need to beat. Although I'll just ask you a quick question. What the fuck is up with Team Coast?
Oh God.
How can they be that bad? How can they be that bad? I am astounded, Nick. I'm astounded at how bad they are.
I don't know. I won't talk about any of the players. I think Impaler is a fantastic player. I think Sheep has potential. Whether or not he taps into it, you know, well, now he's not on Coast anymore. Basically, I will say this though, is when I was potentially going to work with Coast, because it was an opportunity to work with Impaler again, okay? I was told that I would not be a head coach. That's number one. Number two, I was told that I would be sent VODs, okay? And that my goal was to pinpoint where the errors were, timestamp it, and send it back to the players without interaction with the players. And they were supposed to find the problems on their own. Richard, I'm wide-eyed, fucking mouth open, like... I noped the fuck out of there, Richard. Let me tell you what. Like, so, that's that. I mean, no... You can't have a team like without a coaching staff if they clearly need one, you know? Unless they're all mechanical leviathans and they just have to kind of find their place, kind of like Alliance was last split or last year. You know what I mean? Like they were just the best in.
So we're back. So as I was asking you just again before, we had this time Twitch problems. So we've had a DDoS and Twitch problems. Great show so far. Yeah, it's brilliant. We're lucky. I just wanted to ask you about the WinterFox situation because several people in the chat did ask me to ask you, and that was as I'm sure you know, the bizarre decision in the bot lane to sort of move Altec across to support and then bring somebody in to kind of play AD carry, and it was just an absolute mess, and it really surprised me that was happening. I think Altec's one of the best, up and coming AD carries in the NA region. I really rate him as a talent. So why the fuck would you move him to support and play a weaker player in that role? That's so important in the late game. What are your thoughts in particular about all that happened there with the WinterFox?
I don't know what's going on. Like in all the rosters, like everything that's going on with roster swaps and stuff, it's like people seem to think that you can just fix problems by replacing people. And to some case, that does have some truth, but it doesn't fix the issue of if it's not that your team's having like heavy mechanical issues and they're having rotational issues, it's not going to be fixed by swapping a player. Like, I don't know. I mean, I can't speak too much more on it. I don't know what decisions that they're coming to or like what they're gonna decide on, in coming weeks and stuff. I do think putting Altec on support is probably a mistake. But yeah.
Okay, well, I mean that's fair enough. That's direct. Now, what I was going to go to before we started talking about specific teams in NA was just off the basis of IEM. The old argument has come up again: which region is stronger, NA and EU? And you know how that? Yeah, I know. Yeah, roll your eyes. I know that. No. I fucking have that reaction every time it comes up. Now, I've got to say that looking at the way that the EU LCS is played out compared to the NA LCS, where the teams will seem to be much closer together, and in EU LCS, I think the overall standard is lower. I look at some of the teams that are relatively high up in the league and how they're performing at things like IEM. I think, this isn't a particularly great league. Do we now have to accept that EU is the weakest major region now, in your opinion?
By far. No. Okay. I think SK and H2K is EU's saving grace right now. Likewise, though, I mean, okay, so if you take the best EU teams, you put them up against the best NA teams, it's good. Like, it's a good, it's pretty good. The issue then lies in the, as you filter down, I mean, I guess you can have Coast versus MYM. That might, you'll have a game there. But other than that, the lower tier EU teams versus the lower tier NA teams, I think it favors the NA teams. But like all things, it changes with season. So, you can't say anything definitive on that. Look at last year Alliance compared to Elements now. That's not something you would expect. And then also I'm really excited because we're going to see Origen in the LCS. Probably. Well, I mean, 99%, yeah. So
is there not an argument though that when Origen, do come into the LCS, and I agree, I think it's inevitable. Are we not gonna? Is there not an argument there to say that those guys maybe are starting to get to that stage in their careers where? And I'm not saying I believe this, but some people might refer to them as, has-beens or whatever, that they were good and now, they're not so good now. Challenger is a far weaker environment than LCS. We've seen teams dominate in Challenger, get into LCS and actually do really badly. I'm thinking of obviously Team Coast in NA, and it's happened in Europe as well in the past before. So are Origen going to be a force to be reckoned with, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I honestly do. They have a lot of veterans. They have a veteran aura to them. They have players which belong in the LCS but just currently aren't. It's not like this is Unicorns of Love coming into the LCS and it's like, well, they dominated Challenger Series, they're gonna dominate LCS. I don't think it's the same thing. I
Okay.
think this is basically from the moment of conception for that team, they were gonna just go into LCS.
Mm.
I think I mean that's my perspective. It's kind of like what people were saying last year if CLG would have been relegated or something, they just would have shred every team in the Challenger series and they were guaranteed back into LCS. I think it's the same exact thing. I think Origen right now probably stands as a middle of the pack to higher pack team, just off my assumptions and like
Okay.
from what I've been hearing. So
All right.
yeah.
I mean, I think that's fair assessment. I am looking forward to seeing how Origin do, and I agree with you. I do think it's inevitable that they're going to get into LCS, barring some sort of horrendous upset.
Yeah.
But I don't see it. I mean, the bottom of EU looks really weak.
Hmm.
And one team I will ask you about specifically before we wrap up the show. Well, actually, two teams. I will just pick your
Okay.
brains quickly about this before I let you go and get on with your coaching schedule. Is
Hmm.
first of all, Roccat, who I think lots of people were saying they're dark horses for potentially being at the top of the league. Everyone really admired the way that they, handled their business. They brought Nuke in. People were like, this is going to be the final piece in the jigsaw for them. Overpower top lane. People are like, yeah, that's going to work. They've got a good jungler. They've got a solid bot lane. This is actually going to be really good. And of course, they've been battling right down at the bottom. They're only just above Giants, and like third from bottom in the league overall. So, are you surprised by what's happened with Roccat, given that they seem to have everything in their infrastructure and everything in their team to guarantee them a certain degree of success?
I'm, I guess, thoroughly surprised that they're not performing as well as I would have thought that they would have, especially leading up to LCS and scrims. They were like the hardest team by far. Like,
Mm.
uh, like their vision control was immaculate. It used to be. And this is when they were using Nuke Duck, but they were, Ryu was still the official mid laner, but they were using Nuke Duck inside scrim sometimes. Um, I think Nuke Duck is a phenomenal player.
Mm.
I don't know enough about the other players. I think it's just honestly a bump in the road. Like it's gonna happen sometimes,
Mm.
like you're gonna lose and whatever. We'll see how they adjust for summer split. I don't think spring split is ever really a true testament to stuff, because it's the first season coming right off the off season. And teams will have to adjust and get back into the groove of stuff and whatever.
Mm.
I think summer split is always the ultimate test
Yeah.
of everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the final question, and this is one that you might be able to go into a bit more depth about, is of course Elements. 5 for
Uh-huh.
9, right down there, joint seventh with Roccat. This is a team that I think they won the previous split. They went to Worlds. Yeah, okay, we won't talk about that, but they were considered to be the top team in Europe, and subsequently they've really fallen down. They're now getting into this almost nightmarish habit of, oh, we'll bring in a sub, we'll change a player, we'll swap this, we'll do that, and ultimately none of it seems to have addressed any of the problems. So I wanted to ask you what you thought about Elements and how they were currently conducting themselves.
Um, I think the issue with Elements is that other players caught up. In terms of mechanics and stuff, you can't just drag it out to the 50-minute game and Reckless and Froggen will carry you.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that their tunnel vision mindset and some aspects, like how they go about their gameplay and stuff, is detrimental to their growth as players and as a team, ultimately. I think all the roster swaps and stuff is them trying to find a way to basically have something. Basically, it feels like, this maybe won't make sense to people, is they're looking for a Dade. Someone
Okay.
that forcefully just knocks them out of this like play style that they're having, and he does it in such demanding fashion that you can't help but go with it, and then they can still just continue to do the stuff that they do. You
Mm-hmm.
know, maybe that's what they like need or what they're looking for. Alternatively, just get like an actual coach, but you can't really do that. I mean, you can hire Korean coaches. It's nothing like what fucking Mylixia was saying in that one interview with Travis. I think it was Travis, where he's
Yeah.
like, you can't get this level of macro coaching without paying 300 to 400,000 a year. I'm like, Ohm was getting 2K, Myungwon was getting 2K. Like, where did these numbers come from? Like, the highest end coaches get 4K a month in Korea. So I don't know where those numbers are come from. Okay, so if you give a Korean coach the full stipend by Riot, okay, so you give him 2,500, fork out another 1,500, there you go. You have a top-level Korean coach. Like, I don't know where those numbers are coming out. If Elements is serious, they actually just, I mean, it goes back to the Dunning-Kruger thing. Like, you can't actually think that nothing's wrong. You know what I mean? It's not woe is me.
So
get something, you know?
I want to ask you then, what would you do? Let's say, Elements called you up on the phone tomorrow and they were like, look, we're going to make you an offer you can't refuse to poach you away from Gravity. You've got complete control, complete autonomy. Do what you need to do to fix this team and get us back to being the #1 team in Europe. What would you do?
Force them to, well, not force them. Basically show them variables and things that are inarguable that they can't not argue based on their opinion. Do you know what I mean? Like, you have to get that. Basically, this is an analogy I use in coaching a lot, is, if someone's afraid of heights and I tell them, go to the top of the skyscraper and there's a beautiful view, you can tell them that a million times, but if you don't show them, why the fear of heights is ludicrous and that, if you actually do go up there, there's a really, nice view, etc., they're never actually going to do it. You know what I mean? If you don't get to the, basically there's this thing, and I talked about it with the analysts that were in Roar, is you don't just go to the fetus, you go to the 23 chromosomes, 23, like the sperm and the egg. You got to find those, because those are the real problems, not, the creation of like whatever is. So you have to find the problems, and that's easily found if you actually know what you're doing in terms of analysis and like you're seeing people interact, etc. And then from there, you use stuff as examples to better articulate and I guess force your point. And then if they still argue with it, well, then Dunning-Kruger, like,
Yeah. So, I mean, do you think it can be fixed? Then do you think it's just a coaching issue? You don't think it's necessarily a staff issue? Because I know when Wicked stood down, a lot of people were like, oh, well, that's it then. That's going to fix everything. Wicked's been a big problem. And then, obviously, they didn't. They brought in Kevin, and that didn't work out. And now Wicked's back. And then it was like, oh, well, Nif's been bad for a long, long time. Oh, now they've got Crepo. That's going to fix everything. And, of course, that hasn't fixed everything. So, I mean, do you think it's, it is just a coaching issue? It's nothing to do with the players? Do you believe that current roster can still be #1 in Europe?
No, they can't be #1 in Europe. Basically, what they're trying to do, I'll use medicine as an analogy or something, is they have, fucking tuberculosis like growing in their lungs, right? Like, and instead of going on, the antifungals and everything that removes the tuberculosis slowly but surely, they take, ibuprofen for the fever. They take, other NSAIDs, acetaminophen, etc., for the symptoms. What they're doing with all these roster swaps and stuff is they're trying to relieve the symptoms, but that doesn't you still have tuberculosis. Like, you're either going to fix that or you're going to die. And in that case, it's relegation, Yeah. There you go.
I mean, you think Elements could, realistically, you think there's a chance that they could get relegated? I mean, I think it would be tough for them in this particular season because obviously you've got absolute, shit shows right down at the bottom. I think Giants. It's no coincidence that the two teams that have had management issues this split are the teams that are down the bottom. Obviously MYM, which we've already talked about, and of course Giants that have had they've been practicing in land cafes rather than a team house, and they've been having problems. But I mean, do you think Elements could potentially get sucked into a relegation situation if they keep going the way they're going?
Let me use the tuberculosis thing. Basically, Elements is a person with an extremely strong immune system, and they're perfectly healthy, more so than the average person. And so the tuberculosis is going to take more time to kill them. But they're not immune to the fact that tuberculosis will kill them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I follow the analogy.
I don't think right now they're at relegation, but eventually that tuberculosis is going to move to other, it's going to move to other major organs and whatever, and then you're fucked.
The rot could spread.
Exactly. So.
All right. Okay. Cool. Well, look, man. I know you, like you say, I know you've got a schedule to, to adhere to. So I want to just say, just before we wrap up, And it's been a strange show for me. Like, we've had this conversation, and I've been sat there waiting for sort of Ram to interrupt with a meme, and of course he's not here. There's no Broken Shard, and I'm sure you guys would have loved to have, you know, had some back and forth. So it's a shame he's not here. But obviously, before we wrap up, I will let you plug anything that you feel you need to plug. So, because you know you don't just coach pros, you know, I'm pretty sure you'd even coach me if I had the money for it, which of course I don't, because I only make 1 cent per show. So plug away. Plug away.
You can follow me on Twitter, LSXYZ9, the number 9. I have a YouTube channel. You just search Lastshadow9. I post tons of coaching videos on League of Legends to help people get better. All skill levels usually are on there. Silver through Challenger is on there. And then recently I started doing a review, like VOD breakdown of top players like Apto, Faker, etc. And then anyone's free to add me on Facebook or Skype and ask me basically questions that you feel like I'm not going to answer on Twitter or Ask FM because I just don't see it. And I'll try to help you out.
Okay.
So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, look, Nick, it was great to pick your brains. I know you've got like 8 hours scrims ahead of you tonight, and you've only had 2 hours sleep. So I hope you make it through to the end. I'll be thinking of you moving forward. Thanks a lot for coming on the show and giving us your insight. I do really appreciate it. And of course, to all the people who watched and enjoyed the show, the good news is First Blood is going to be back next week, hopefully with our regular co-hosts. We're going to be running at our regular time of 10 o'clock UK, that's 11 o'clock Central European, and then whatever wacky American times, depending on what coast you're on. I can't be bothered to work it all out, but basically the regular time, the time that's on my Twitter, that's when we're going to be running. So we'll be back next week. I have no idea who the guest is going to be or what the fuck we're going to be talking about, but that's League of Legends, and that's First Blood. So thanks a lot for watching. Really appreciate it, and I will see you next week.